Choosing the right care for your loved one is a big decision. The choice that you make can have a lasting impression or impact rather on their well-being. Making the wrong choice could lead to inconsistent care, added stress, and even safety concerns. Hi, I'm Orrett Bailey.
And I'm Marva Bailey. And today we're diving into the pros and cons of hiring a private caregiver versus a home care agency.
So number one is cost.
Yes.
And this
That's
is
the biggest thing.
This is a biggie. Oftentimes when we get a call, the first question out of the gate is, what are your rates, or how much do you charge?
Yeah. And a lot of times, our goal is to get before the family representative or the senior to explain how we serve, what we provide, the services we provide, the quality of the care we provide. But a lot of times we find that, and rightly so in this economy, that people are price shopping.
Right. And here's what we want, a myth we want to bust.
Yes.
That hiring a private caregiver is cheaper.
And that's true. And let me put this caveat.
Okay.
I will even tell someone who is calling, if I sense that price is the biggest issue, that if they're able, if they have the bandwidth to provide the supervision or oversight for a private caregiver, then go for it. So you may think, okay, it costs less to pay the caregiver, but the hidden costs, that's the bummer. We're talking about things like liability insurance, workers' comp, and bonding. And have you ever thought what would happen if a caregiver, your private caregiver, has an accident on the job? And just remember, your home is considered, or your loved one's home is considered her workplace, right, the caregiver's workplace. How will you cover the cost of their medical costs, like workers' comp?
What if your caregiver gets injured and potentially sues you because, as Marva mentioned, that's her workplace, or injuring your loved one, or steals from you? So there are a number of things that can happen there that can potentially cost you way more than just hourly rate that you're looking at. And with home care agency like ours, we have liability insurance, we have workers' comp to cover injuries on the job, we are bonded to cover all of those situations, so that whatever situations arise, that cost does not fall back on you, because we are prepared to take care of that. So number two, hiring.
And we have talked before about the hiring process that we provide, how we vet our caregivers. They're not just pick up on the street and go. We have a pipeline we're constantly hiring, and we have a pipeline of caregivers who are ready, trained, right, background checked,
right,
drug tested, and vetted. And especially if they're to drive the client, that background check includes a motor vehicle driving records check as well. And did I say trained? Yes, yeah. Trained and ready to go.
Right. And so, think of it again here. We just talk about cost. The cost here in your time to meet with all of those caregivers to interview. Are you just going to pick the first one? And
where are you going to find them?
Exactly. So the costing going to some site to locate them. All of these checks are additional costs and time that you have to spend in order to hire someone that meets your particular needs, will take the best care of your loved one. That with an agency like ours, we take that off your plate and we absorb those costs, right, so that you don't have to pay them upfront.
Number three is training. Are the caregivers trained? Are they getting ongoing training? Are they being supervised? In our field, training is critical.
This is so important because one of the things that we see is that a caregiver will come in and say they have 5 years, 10 years experience. But when we place them on a case and we supervise them, we realize that there are gaps in their ability to provide a certain level of care. When you hire a caregiver privately, are you there to supervise them on a regular basis to see or find out those gaps and then
provide the adequate training
so that then they're providing the care that your loved one needs? And then if you recognize it's not a good fit, do you have someone who you can replace that person with on a moment's notice so that there's continuity of care and your loved one is being taken care of?
And even though we have a thorough process, and even when we train people, and we find sometimes they say, I have 10 years experience or 5 years experience. They get in on a case, they have a little hesitation about maybe bathing a client. Like in their 5 years, they've never bathed a client. Even though they may say that in the interview, yes, I've bathed, I've that. Sometimes they just don't have the best techniques, the best way to go about it. We get in, we recognize this, the supervisor or even myself or another training caregiver will go in and ensure that this is done. Also, they come, a lot of times they have come up through the system, their years of experience just with really bad techniques, or their idea, we had a caregiver, even though they went through the process orientation, they have been trained so long that in this field, they literally sit and watch the client. That's not what we do. There's a care plan, there are tasks that they must accomplish, and it's through supervision that getting in on that case, we either need to replace the caregiver or provide the adequate training.
Right. And so those are reasons why, as an agency, we provide a better context for training and supervision than individual family member can, given their commitment to their profession and work and so forth. So number 4, managing. When you hire a private caregiver, you become that caregiver's manager. I think we mentioned this earlier. How much is your time worth? It takes time to manage and supervise, set schedule. If something changes and they need to be off, you're scurrying around trying to find a replacement, so forth. All the paperwork that needs to happen to make it work, you are responsible for that. Is that something you want to handle?
Another critical aspect of managing is that you are now responsible for the quality of the work that the caregiver provides. So another critical aspect of managing is that you are now responsible for the quality. Not only are you the client, but you are also the manager / supervisor. So what if the caregiver is not doing his or her work correctly, properly, adequately? Have you designed a care plan? Are they following the care plan correctly? Are they providing quality care? Who's supervising that? And if she does something wrong or if she's late, you're now supervising that aspect. You're having to pull her aside and say, this is not being done properly. And that's where the difference is with a home care agency.
Right.
That becomes our responsibility. Our supervisor is checking in with the caregiver at least every 10 days, at least. And when there's a new caregiver, she's checking in weekly. How is this going? What is happening here? Do you feel comfortable on the role? If there are issues, if there's additional training, if we need to step in.
Here's the important thing is that you don't have to worry about reprimanding a caregiver. If there's an issue, you give us a call. You don't have to worry about it. It's taken care of. And so as an agency, we take that burden off of you so that you can focus on your family and all the other things you have to worry about.
But what about when the caregiver gets sick or needs a vacation or, as we have recently had, transportation issues?
Cars break down all the time.
Busted, something broke. Just had that yesterday, twice. And we were able to go to our pipeline and find a comparable caregiver who could go in, someone who had even worked with the client before, to fill that gap and provided smooth, seamless. You, the client, never knows what's going on. But because we have battled that issue and ensure that someone is there on time to cover the scheduled shift. So what do you do when the caregiver does not show up? Who do you call?
Right. You have to rearrange your day. It may mean missing work.
In this case, in our case, when Pathlight is involved or home care agency is involved, you call us. And then we would have known already that the person didn't show, because we have our clock in, clock out process. If the caregiver doesn't clock in a certain time, we already know and can anticipate that there's going to be a concern. We will call you and say, hey, We didn't see the caregiver clocking at this point. We're on it. We're checking what's going on. And in the meantime, from our pipeline, a mass text is sent out to our qualified caregivers, and we can rescue that shift by having someone covering. And you can continue with your schedule for the day. Maybe a few minutes late, but the schedule and your loved one is safe. And I have gone in before. If I'm closest to that, I'll go hold a shift until a backup caregiver can come in, because we believe the safety and well-being of your loved one is critical, and we also respect your time and your schedule.
So these are just some of the factors that help you to evaluate the value that you receive from using a home care agency like Pathlight versus seeking to hire a private caregiver for your loved one. And if this is an issue that you're wrestling with, hiring private versus agency, we'd love to provide more clarity for you. So visit pathlightseniorcare.com and set up an in-home assessment, and we can give you more information so that you can make a decision that you will be happy with.